Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
It's a beautiful evening here in Nashville, Tennessee. We normally don't do these at nighttime, but our schedule's this is what we had to do. And it's okay. It's raining outside. It's a beautiful December month. Sitting across the podcast table from me tonight is Jana Uttz, who is an industry expert. Maybe I should say is a music industry expert here in Nashville, Tennessee. Has a long, rich history. And we're going to talk about something that honestly we don't discuss too often. And we should have more. Or maybe I should say this. We should talk about a lot more. And that's women within the music industry. And this is something that I know is very near and dear to your heart.
It is.
And honestly, to me, it is too, because I'm a guy. We don't understand these dynamics. So hopefully we can clear through a little bit of that clutter. Anyway, Jana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again, Bob. I appreciate it. We've kind of had a warm day today. Here in Tennessee. If you've not visited our area, it can go up, down, and all around.
And that's just in one day.
That's just in one day. That is correct.
When you and I started to put notes together to talk about the show, and we've had you on the show before, but when we started to put notes together regarding this particular show, what are we going to talk about? And as I said earlier, what's very near and dear to your heart? And that was really women within the music industry. Now, a lot of women have made a very huge impact within the music industry. And I think the biggest one who's really made a lot of news lately is Taylor Swift. With her tour, her 2023 tour, literally selling out in a matter of minutes. The Ticketmaster issue that's going on with that. People have asked me what I've thought about that. And I think, at some point, I kind of foresee maybe Taylor having her own ticket agency. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think that's entirely possible.
The woman is definitely, she's definitely got the team and the power and the money behind her to do that. But we're not talking about that right now.
Correct.
We're going to talk about you and some of your thoughts. And I think let's start off with, first of all, because you do vocal coaching, you do help artists with their voices. Let's talk about, number one, the science behind the voice.
So one of the things that if you study science and you look at the evolution of man from the dawn of time, you will find that there are different factions of music, different decibels of the voice, different types of instruments that are going to actually be preferred by the human ear. The science is there to prove it.
Are we saying that the man's voice is preferred over the woman's voice?
No, not necessarily. What I have found is that there is a range in a human voice at which there is a very pleasing tone to the ear that is almost universal. It has to do with how the sound waves travel, the decibel level, and also how it's produced by the human voice. This explains many times the phenomenon of a superstar that globally is recognized. Decades later, people are still studying their styles, or they are citing them as influences. I would say a recent example of that would be the movie Bohemian Rhapsody a couple of years ago that it showed actually the rise of the rock group Queen and focused on Freddie Mercury. And in most anybody's minds, he would arguably be at least in the top 3 vocalists of all times.
Well, he had a voice that was really unnatural compared to everybody else out there. His voice in itself was a phenomenon.
It was.
And you don't really see that or hear that too often. Now, Queen has had Adam Lambert take over as the lead vocalist, replacing Freddie Mercury. And Adam Lambert is great, but he's not Freddie Mercury.
He's not. That is correct. I would say that one of the things to the listeners to think about is the fact that you're looking at nuances of the voice that make them different, just as you just mentioned. And one of the things that happens when talent develops naturally is that it is typically going to be funneled in a direction that can have something to do with the pitch, okay, the structure of the voice, the type of range that a singer is going to have,
right,
the type of instrumentation that you're going to put with it, the cadence, the rhythm. And another interesting thing is diction and or whatever the natural tongue is.
Why is it that it seems, especially on radio, that men are preferred over women?
Well, I figured that would be something that we would talk about.
Well, I'm not going to leave it alone. I mean, the common denominator when we talk about hits on radio is it really almost seems to be 2-to-1 men over women. And I don't necessarily think that is fair. Well, in fact, I'm going to rephrase that. I'm going to say I don't think that's fair. And also, I think there's a lot of great female vocalists out there that could really run circles around a lot of the guys that seem to be on the top of the charts. And I don't get why they're not getting that exposure.
I think there's 2 or 3 reasons for that we don't often talk about. Again, I'm going to go back to science and say that there are a lot of things that are inborn in the human psyche that are there from really conception. Mm-hmm. You're going to be influenced more than you realize by the type of home and the type of music that was played in that home. Then you might want to realize we're looking at different cultures where the community is very musically based and the community regularly gathers and plays music or plays instruments. You're going to be looking at the age that normally musicians start to develop in different cultures, and you're going to be looking at education and how that affects things. Now that we've got a global, worldwide audience, you can argue that women are absolutely equal in what they bring to the table. They are very popular in some cultures more than others.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is the fact that in country music, you've got a bit of an exception there. And that is the fact that it is more necessary in country music to get radio airplay and to have a personal relationship with your radio station or your DJs or your program managers than in other genres of music.
One of the things that seems to be clearly evident with anybody, and of course our listening audience is all over the world, but what seems to be clearly evident in country music is that for every Carrie Underwood that you have, or we can go back a ways, Martina McBride, LeAnn Rimes, Loretta Lynn, Dottie West, just some really legends in the industry. They still didn't seem to get the respect that their male counterparts did. Now, I think that's starting to change, but for whatever reason, country radio, and I think, let's face it, I think pop radio and rock radio is also guilty as charged when it comes to not providing an equal turntable for female artists versus male artists. But, because this is Nashville and we are in the country music capital of the world, it's interesting that the female recording artist, once again, the exception maybe being Taylor Swift. I think she's kind of that phenomenon that stands on her own.
I would say she's in a category by herself.
Yeah, she really is, yeah. And maybe it's a super category, I don't know. But I wish somebody could explain to me why radio does not provide the same amount of opportunity and leverage for a female artist that they do for male artists. they're out there. I wish somebody would share that with me.
My thoughts on the matter is the fact that, number one, I think we need to be honest about the strides that we've made within the short period of time that women have been a major force in the music scene. Mm-hmm. We forget sometimes that this world is centuries old and that modern recorded music is less than 100 years old or close to 100 years old. Right. So exponentially, when you look at how far women have come in that short period of time, I think we can become a little bit more excited about what's happened there. Now, one of the things that, especially in America, has taken place are how social norms have changed. The 40s, the 50s, most everything was a male-dominated world. Mm-hmm. You had men being the sole breadwinners. Mom was home with the children. The nuclear family was more intact than it is now, so you did not have households dividing. And I think that unquestionably that had something to do with the rise of women in country music and other genres. The addition of a second paycheck or a second income can give a good bit of freedom when it's not been there before.
And I think that brings up, it now requires a business mindset that I don't think has been in play before. Women, back in the early days were discouraged from going to school and then begrudgingly were allowed into higher education. Within the music industry, personally, I had female bosses when I worked at record labels, and I actually appreciated them and respected them as much, if not more, because no games, no messing around. This is how we're going to do it, and, this is it, or, hit the highway. And I appreciate that. I didn't necessarily like the politics that went on, and I know it was twice as difficult for them as it was for their male counterparts.
That's true.
But it does require a business mindset. And do you think the female entrepreneur, especially in the music business, do you think they're starting to wrap their heads around that mindset?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I think that Taylor Swift is the perfect example of someone who has built a business from the ground up and understood clearly from day one that she has a product to sell, and it's her job to keep the public interested in coming back and buying more.
Right.
And one of the common things I see in artists that are getting started is they don't understand that they're CEO of a company.
They absolutely are.
The buck stops with me, and I need to understand what's going on. There are, I think, interesting diversions when people think that they're just going to go stand on a corner somewhere and someone's going to throw money at them, or a record label's going to come by and scoop them up and give them a big record deal. And I think we've done our fair share in at least American society to do a fairy tale type version of that. But I don't think I can name a woman musician that would not be considered an entrepreneur or an excellent businesswoman. And the other thing that I have found, and I will counsel women that I'm talking to that are in the music industry or thinking about trying to start a career, is that they need to understand that the buck stops with them, and that you're talking about having to amass a payroll that you're responsible for, and you're going to have a crew of people that work for you. You have a staff. And sometimes that disconnect is very real, I've learned, and not just with women. I find that in men too. We have the warm, fuzzy feeling of wanting to do our art and get it out there and make people feel good and change the world. One of the ways you can change the world with your music is providing a paycheck for someone else so that they can provide for their family. So I think that that would be one of the things we all need to talk about more. Moms, talk with your daughters about business. Let them do some sort of little business at home, whether it be selling crafts on the internet, the old lemonade stand, having them actually take a job and holding them accountable for making some finances and then learning how to handle that. And I think that we can couple that with the lack of instruction in the schools and the fact that music is not getting, of course, it doesn't get the respect that sports do.
Right.
But also kids are just not having the options sometimes of being exposed to that type of thing. I would say that sometimes, and this might surprise some of the listeners, that could be a blessing. And I'll tell you how I came to this. I am not a songwriter. As much as I would love to be, I do not have the gift of songwriting. I've tried my hand at writing a few songs, and I'm pretty sure I ripped them off of other people. I would just toss it away and go, nope, this is not in my wheelhouse. And I was counseling, as I was beginning to work, a young singer-songwriter and trying to give him some guidance. And we were discussing whether or not we were going to work together. And I lamented the fact that I had not ever considered myself a songwriter, nor did I think I had the talent. And he looked at me really with shock on his face. And he said, Jana, when would you have had time? He said, I've met your parents. They're wonderful. You had a Leave It to Beaver type of childhood. Your mom and dad took you to concerts. They took you to church. You got to sing in the choir. You got to be in the band. I had none of that. My folks split apart. He said, I literally turned to music for survival. And he said, on Friday nights when everybody else was at the game, I was in my closet composing songs. And that was quite a lesson for me to learn. The human spirit wanting to create art, the drive is something that's innate and it's born in you. And sometimes we can be so busy that we're not paying attention to that, or we don't realize it's there. And I think that we look at things like the contests that are on TV, and you and I've talked about that,
right.
the singing contest, and we sometimes don't understand that there is a process and that you've got to be very, very, very good at your craft, and that's not going to happen without sacrifice. And so I think that sometimes there might be, I would say, an edge to someone who hasn't had as much given to them, and they have fought tooth and nail to develop their craft and get out there and make it, or at least get to the point where it can be something they can rely on monetarily. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that that's something we should recognize when we're looking at future musicians. One of the things that I know is controversial right now in the music industry is the fact that, from what I hear, music executives, record labels are scanning TikTok and YouTube and things of that nature, looking for people who have they've got the most likes, or they've had the most traffic on their site, or, there's repeat business there. They're selling tons of merch, and that is being used to formulate a music career for some of these people. And I know that's a big controversy. I've heard several different music artists talk about it. I've heard a couple of interviews on the radio about it. And it's an interesting conundrum, I think, that we find ourselves in, because at the end of the day, the music business needs to make money.
Well, and I think that gets us back to when we talk about getting into this industry that we're in. And I had this conversation with Don Muscuse, who was on the show a few weeks ago, that this is a very risky business. It's very, very risky. It's not fun. The rate of success is
not a fun business on many days, is it, Bob?
You have to be in this business because you love it. And that's really what it has to be in your DNA. It's in your genetics, or you shouldn't be in it. So that really does require everything you've just said gets us back to what we started on, which is it requires a business mindset.
I would say also that we need to remember evolution and the fact that men and women are genetically different. And anybody that has a child can attest to this. You're going to look at that child and you're going to see genetic gifts, or sometimes it's not a gift. You're going, oh my gosh, I wish he didn't get that from me, Yeah. And we have nothing to do with that, okay? God has knit that person together. DNA is there from the beginning, and we learn over time who that person is and what their gifts are. And that is something that I think we need to be careful about projecting onto someone that you are excited about helping. And I'm going to say this lovingly to family members who are overly excited about their child. They're going to win American Idol. They're going to win a Grammy. And we've talked in the past about everybody getting a trophy. And I think that one of the things it does is I think that it can, I'll just say it, I think that laziness can come into the picture. And I think that also we underestimate the power of the genes.
Yeah.
And that if you're a female, at some point, most females feel their biological clock ticking. And that's going to vary from woman to woman. It's going to vary from culture to culture. When you look at the American culture, I like to look at, well, let's go back to women role models, first of all, in the country music industry. Probably the beginning was Mother Maybelle Carter, who was probably the first woman to really make a name for herself in country music. She raised her daughters on the road. She is highly esteemed to this day. That was hard. You talk about somebody knocking down doors when nobody was doing that. And you didn't have nannies that traveled on the road with you.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay. We had Loretta Lynn. She kicked down the door of social aspects or conversations that were simply not being had. We weren't talking about things like birth control. We weren't talking about what happened when you found out that your man or your husband was probably going to divorce you for someone else down the road. Everybody feared that, and we all knew instances of where that was happening, but she sang about it. And let me tell you, she got a lot of backlash about it.
A lot of taboo subjects that those artists brought to the forefront.
Yeah, then we had Dolly Parton, who came along, and she's very interesting. Everybody loves Dolly. She's beautiful. She's sexy. She's down home. She's just like the girl next door, and she is one of the most phenomenal businesswomen on earth.
Yeah.
But she's not afraid to be feminine. She's not afraid to talk about the fact that she cooks her husband dinner at home. And she's not afraid to talk about the fact that, women, if they want to work, that's okay. If they want to cuss, that's okay. If they want to be as important as the man next door, that's okay. She, I would say, was probably the first TV star that was a woman role model in the country music world, because at that point, women were basically sidekicks. You were going to be a hee-haw honey. Mm-hmm. Dolly was a sidekick to Porter Wagner, and that made their careers. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think that Dolly broke the mold when she actually stepped away from a sure thing. She was a household name at that point. I watched every weekend. I had my place in front of my TV set. But she also wore makeup and looked pretty and wasn't afraid to be feminine. And that was the 70s, where women were out, protesting a lot of times. They were burning their bras. They were saying, take me as I am. I'm not going to worry about being pretty. And that's an interesting contrast right there, because Dolly was kind of a combination of the two opposing sides. To me, it all came full circle with Shania Twain. Shania was the first woman to actually really be sexy on stage, not be apologetic, and she took control as a female in her world. When you listen to her lyrics, Dolly does too, but Shania, because of the exposure that she had and the fact that she was a crossover success, in the fact that she was getting a lot of radio airplay in pop and even sometimes rock. Her ex-husband was Mutt Lange. And, of course, they worked together. They were a power couple. But she was taught, in her song, she's telling the guys, I'm going out with the girls tonight and you're watching the kids.
Yeah.
I better not see your boots under someone else's bed. And we actually, in country music, we still had the stand by your man message going on and some things of that nature. Now, I'm going to bring this full circle and say, to me, that's the way it should be. And I'm not real happy with a one-sided argument where women are just angry all the time and we're beating the men over the heads and we're bemoaning the fact that culture hasn't changed quickly enough, because I think we forget the beauty of why men and women are different and how that plays into things. Now, I don't mind telling you, I'm a product of the Me Too culture. I actually was in a situation where a job of mine could have depended on what a male coworker was asking or trying to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was not something that I succumbed to, and I'm very grateful for that. But I know firsthand, personal experience, what goes on in the workplace. And I would say to young women, number one, never apologize. Ever apologize for being female and thinking you're inferior, number one. But also realize if you walk out that door, I promise you there's another job waiting on you. And you don't have to fear that. I think that it's realistic to understand that when you are going into certain industries, music industry, film, even the modeling industry, being sexy is a part of the package. If we're being really, really, really honest. Should it be the most important thing? No. Should it be something that women should try to change if that's not their nature? No. But I think we're not being honest with ourselves if we don't say that's part of it. It's not like men and women are going to change their nature over time. And that's where I think role models in the home come into play. And I think that we need to be having these conversations, across the industry. But I tend to favor us coming together in a way that's friendly instead of just constantly being angry and beating our chest and trying to force an issue that is still, in my opinion, something that people maybe don't quite understand as much as we think they do.
In the studio with us here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table is Jana Uttz.
This is Amira Alvarez, the founder and CEO of The Unstoppable Woman. Thanks for joining me with host Bob Bender on The Business Side of Music, my favorite music business podcast.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hey friends, this is Dr. Garrett Hope. I am a speaker, coach, and composer. I am also host of the Portfolio Composer podcast and founder and executive director of the Ultimate Music Business Summit. The third annual Ultimate Music Business Summit is a 3-day virtual conference that'll be held on January 5th, 6th, and 7th, 2023. This 3-day virtual event features over 24 speakers to help you build your music business. As a musician, you care about your art. You want to make a difference in your community and in the world. You want to pass your knowledge on to your students. And you want to do more than trade your time for money and just get by every month. UMBS is all about the one thing you didn't learn in music school, realizing that you are a business. It offers dozens of ways to build a career as an independent musician, including marketing, copywriting, studio development, mindset, money, and networking opportunities. Whether you're a composer, touring musician, studio teacher, recording artist, or professor, UMBS is for you. Get your ticket now at musicsummit.biz.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Back in the studio, sitting across the podcast table here in Nashville, Jana Uttz, here's a question that, and you've kind of touched on it briefly. It's almost like a stone skipping across the water, and I want to dig into this a little more. And that is, should women get mad? Should they get even? Or should they get better?
If I'm being honest, I think it should be reverse order.
Okay.
I think all of that is part of it. Each of us is we are influenced in different ways. Different things cause us to try to propel ourselves forward or to try to do a better job or make a name for ourselves. You can look in the sports world. I think it's very, very evident. My favorite sport is basketball.
Okay.
I tried to play basketball, music won out. And I was like third string, but I can say I was on the basketball team. But it's real interesting to look at the different coaching styles in sports. You're going to see some coaches, they're literally screaming, they're having a fit. They may even be berating their team. You have others that are very gentle and quiet. It's more of a, let's talk about what's going on. We've got to get this game turned around. Then you're going to have the cheerleader. Come on, guys, let's do it. Let's do this one more time. Let's go to state. So I think that's going to depend on the woman or the person, but I also think that it should be a savvy combination of that. I think anytime any of us let our emotions get too far down the road, they take over too much. Common sense can really, really go out the window. And, we've all seen examples of that. Someone who's in the prime of their career and it's like they drove off the cliff, or they started acting like they were 20 years younger. They totally forgot where they started, and they try to go over in some new bizarre direction musically.
Right.
And your fans are kind of scratching their heads and things of that nature. And
it's almost like not a midlife crisis, but almost a mid-career crisis.
Yes, it is. And I want to go back and mention the fact that as women, and please don't misunderstand me, I'm not trying to say that this is the most important thing. What I am saying is I think it's important that we acknowledge this. I think it's very, very important that we acknowledge that women are the nesters. It's in our nature when we are designed, when we are born. Not everybody. We're all individuals. But you can look through cultures, and you're going to see that in the majority of cultures, the woman is running the home. I walked in tonight and saw your beautiful Christmas decorations. And what did I say? I said, Debbie, these are beautiful. And then she said, well, Bob did this. And I said, oh, I should have realized it didn't have to be the woman. But I think that is something that, again, with time is changing. But I think that women need to be real honest with themselves and say, what am I willing to either set aside till later, or it might be something that you're going to forfeit altogether in the name of your career.
And I think you just brought up something that is so truly valid, and that is the man's career versus the woman's career. The man historically always been the breadwinner, has been the hunter, where, as you said, the woman has been the nester.
Yes.
The man has always gone out and, beat his chest and said, I'm going to make this happen. But we're talking about a different world. And I don't mean from a time signature. I'm talking about from a creative process. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we delve into the music industry, the entertainment industry, it's that creative DNA genetic component mm-hmm. that I think is almost equal in men and women. If you have that creative gene, you've got it. Mm-hmm. And I mean it. And it's something that is given to you. You're born with it. You can't really go out and buy it. And a lot of people have. Both male and female artists have tried to go out and buy that success from within the entertainment industry. And it just doesn't work. You need that creative gene. For women, though, it's starting, and I'm starting to see it more now, and especially with artists that I started working with back in the 90s. Shania Twain was one that you mentioned. LeAnn Rimes was another one. When Taylor Swift broke in the 2000s, you're starting to see it in other genres of music. Now, some of it, to a certain extent, has gone a little too far.
Yes,
there's damage control there. But I think for the most part, women are making a name for themselves. Now, I'm going to back up even further. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had the opportunity to work with Sam Moore's wife. Now, Sam Moore is from Sam and Dave fame, Mustang Sally and Soul Man and all those great hits.
I know who Sam is.
And his wife, Joyce Moore, is a force to be reckoned with.
Sure.
And I mean that in an absolute loving, just most magnificent way. I have all the respect in the world for that woman. She does not suffer fools gladly. And she's had to suffer me once or twice, you know.
Joyce, I'm on your side, dear. Just saying.
We toured Europe together. We toured Italy together back in 1990 during the World Cup with our respective artists.
Oh, I bet that was wild.
It definitely was. It was, it was an interesting time. But Joyce was somebody who at one point wanted to get an accounting for Sam's music career with especially Sam and Dave. And literally at one point had to walk into the office of the record label and demand a meeting to get the full accounting. Now, not a lot of women have that mindset, or at least back then, and we're talking probably in the 90s, mid-90s, had the mindset, and Joyce, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't have that mindset to do that. And I think she's a pioneer. I think she really has set the benchmark for so many other women, not just performers, but people that work within the entertainment industry. And I truly believe we need so many more of Joyce Moores in this business, or Jerry McDowell's that I worked with, or Sheila Shipley Biddy's that I worked with, April Riders, people that are just, they're within the music industry. And I mention their names because they made such an impression, such a mark on me that,
Sure.
you know, I had the honor to work with them. I'm sure I'm missing a few more out there, but we need those women pioneers to pretty much be fearless and be that breadwinner, be that hunter, and get out there.
I think that in order for that to happen, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And
do you think we're still putting those pieces of the puzzle together?
we are definitely still putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Okay.
All we've got to do is look at election night recently and look at the different comments that are made about whether or not a particular area of the country or a particular area of the world is taking a step back with modern leadership or taking a step forward. Now, it's my opinion that it's a little more complex sometimes than we realize. Let's take Joyce, for instance. I would guess there were some strong women mentors in her life, you know, more than likely. She probably is a survivor of some kind, or at the very least fought very hard, you know, for things that she wanted in life.
To get where she
she was, right. And it's different if someone is telling you, well, you need to stay home and dust, or they're supporting you and saying, thank you for going in and talking to the chairman or the CEO, and I love you for that, honey. Another thing I don't think we're honest about, and I know without a doubt plays a role, and I think we need to all examine ourselves, is jealousy. There are simmering jealousies in all of us. I can be very jealous of someone who's skinnier than me. You know, someone's got whiter teeth than me. Does that mean that I'm going to go out and picket women who are skinny? No. Does that mean that I'm going to write the toothpaste companies and say, it's not fair, some women are having whiter teeth than mine, stop making your product? And that may sound silly, but I think that sometimes we forget that we need to understand why things are the way they are in order to make a better battle plan. Okay? And so you're looking at who you're going to marry. And if that's a fellow artist, you support each other, or is there going to be a little bit of rivalry? And could that undermine a career, or could that be something that would absolutely have you explode in a career? And that is so different for different people.
Right.
We're all so very different. So women that find themselves going in the direction, you know, I want to be the CEO. This is what I want. I think it's really important that you not only, as you're setting your goals, that you take a good look at yourself, and anything that's in your nature or in the back of your mind, listen to it. Have a real conversation with yourself. Let's talk about having children, okay? if you are a young woman and you're going to have a career and it's going to be the most important thing, and you're going to find a mate that supports that you all can be equals in, and you're on the same page about children. Either you're going to have children or you're not, or you're going to bring children on the road with you, or one of you all is going to sacrifice their career at the time. It's important to have those conversations and be really, really honest so it doesn't surface later in a time when it's unexpected. And I think that happens sometimes, in women. And I think that we haven't had those conversations enough with each other, with spouses, with even, someone that might be on the road with us.
Right.
If I'm going to bring the kids on the road with me, I'm going to need some help watching the kids, cooking the meals. That's all. And there's nothing wrong with having those conversations. I was just reading this past week a couple of articles about women. Carrie Underwood was one of them who is touring, and her kids go on tour with her a lot. Her husband is at home running the household. But those are difficult conversations to have, and you might need to have them time and again. I can tell you there have been times in my life where I just wanted to do something. I was going to go out and I was going to parasail. And anybody can look at me and go, you are not an athlete at all. And I read all about it and I was going to do it and all this type of thing. And then a little bit down the road, that totally changed to something else. So we change as human beings. Right. And it's okay to realize that. And even maybe when you're making your goals, say, let's talk about 10 years. Here's what I want. And I want us to come back around and have that conversation when that 10 years is over. Now, you can do that with a spouse. You can do that with a family. When you're talking about a record label or you're talking about a business, that can be a whole nother story. And I think that's where we are today, especially in Nashville, with needing more conversations and maybe not framing those conversations in a way that's going to benefit us the most.
In the studio with us here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table from me, Jana Uttz.
I'm Barbara Barna-Abel of Able Intermedia. Check out my episode on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table from me, Jana Uttz. We touched on it a little bit, and we can insert name here. It could be Los Angeles. It could be New York. It could be Austin. It could be London. It could be Berlin. But because we're here in Nashville, we're going to talk about Nashville. The current environment in this city, with everything that we've discussed, it's
still more of a man's world.
It's still that good old boys club.
It's a good old boys club. There's bias still, even amongst the general public, of women who may think, well, now you've had your career, you should be home with your children. I think there's within the framework of society. And let's face it, women are major buyers of art. We spend a lot of money going to concerts.
Well, let's talk about Taylor Swift, just
Okay.
her. If you look at the demographics of who goes to a Taylor Swift show, I'm going to almost guarantee you it's a predominantly young female audience. Now, I don't know what that age demo is, but I think the same thing would take place if it was a K-pop band out of South Korea.
Oh, yes.
Or if it was, let's say, New Kids on the Block or, NSYNC, those type of acts. I remember when I was out with New Kids on the Block in early 90s, they would take the stage and you could not hear a thing because of the screaming that went on in the audience. And it was just... I
was one of them.
It was young.
It wasn't K-pop, but...
It was young little girls.
I can name some bands.
Tweens and teenagers that... So we have to remember, and I think, once again, New York, L.A., London, Berlin, Austin, Nashville. We have to understand that the female audience, the female consumer, that woman has a lot of purchasing power that I think is being overlooked.
It is totally being overlooked.
And ignored.
And I mean, I think a lot of the women in the households are running the budget. I want to say I had this experience recently, and it literally bowled me over, as my mom would say. I was shocked, quite honestly. I went to the ACM Honors Award show at the Ryman, and Garth Brooks was there, Shania Twain, Kelsey Ballerini, April Lavigne, Morgan Wallen, Hardy. I mean, it goes on. It was a star-studded night. Then they brought out a surprise guest, and it was Taylor Swift. And I've never seen a reaction like that. I haven't. There was, the crowd was at her feet. They knew every word to every song. They were excited. They were genuine. They were passionate. It's just not something that you see very often.
Right.
And I sat there looking around and thinking to myself, wow, have I underestimated this young lady? And how can I talk to other women as to how to gain some of that power in their careers? And a couple of things I'll say is, number one, you start young and you're willing to make some sacrifices. Taylor Swift, I think, started writing music when she was 12 or 13 years old. She would just go in her room every day and write songs for years and years and years. That is not anyone giving you a career on a silver platter.
I want to interject here and say that I remember when Taylor Swift was in high school in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and my boys, my one son was the same age as her in high school in Hendersonville. So I knew her history in the very, very, very early days. Mm-hmm. My mindset has changed dramatically over the years as I have watched her career grow. Maybe I should say this. I have watched her career go, and I've watched her career grow.
I think that's a fair statement.
If that makes sense. And I truly believe my mindset today is, okay, I don't necessarily listen to her music. I couldn't tell you one song from another, but that's not relevant in this conversation. What is relevant is she started a record label. Her dad helped her, along with some really knowledgeable people in the industry.
And I would like to interject in there because I've heard a lot of negatives that Taylor might have gotten an upper hand because of her dad's help or whatever. That's business, folks.
Well, but here's the deal. That only works for a minute and a half.
Of course.
If you don't have the chops to back it up, and I have seen a lot of record label startups in this town. A lot of people have dumped money to get labels started, and they fold within a year or two.
Oh, my goodness, I could write a book. I know you could too.
Or I've seen artists come to town who mom and dad have basically taken their 401k money to finance a career, and that artist has fallen flat on their face. And you touched us on the very beginning, sort of, where, grandma and grandpa and aunt and uncles and mom and dad are all saying, oh, you're great. You've got such a beautiful voice. You're going to be amazing. No, this is where you fish or you cut bait. And I think that's the difference with Taylor Swift. I think that's the difference with Shania Twain. That's the difference with Tina Turner. These women didn't need men in their lives to be successful because they were able to stand on their own merit.
They were self-sufficient. And I would say that jealousy was tempered by hard work and determination. Mm-hmm. It's hard to have time to be jealous of someone else who record might have edged you out or something if you're constantly looking ahead and working. But and I'm going to tell you what I think the key to Taylor Swift is. She knows her audience.
Yes.
And she has never forgotten them ever. One of the things that I think we don't talk about enough is the fact that art reflects society. Period. It does. You can especially look back in history and look at, I don't care if it's paintings, I don't care if it's sculpture, I don't care if it's dance. You are going to find that whatever the modern mindset is, what people are thinking, what's important to them, what has changed, what's not as important as it used to do is going to be reflecting in art. What we need to remember as a worldwide audience and as men and women is that there are enough of us to go around to be represented.
Right.
There's enough to be represented. What I would love to see in Nashville with women, wanting to make more of an impact and making more of a stand is start befriending the people who don't like you, who don't play your music, and who don't care. Do the opposite than what we're doing right now. And I don't think that's bad advice, okay? It's loving your enemy, for lack of a better word, and being smart enough to take a detour when something's not working. I think that we can all agree that things have not come far enough, and it's not hard, it's not easy. But I would say, young women, look at where you can go with your career. What type of degree are you getting? Are you a young woman that can go in and challenge the boys club? Mm-hmm. And then you've got an insider that is there to represent you. I think that, especially in country music, we underestimate, and we talked about this a while ago, but I think we underestimate that those program managers and those DJs need to be your friend. They really do. And I will give someone a second chance. But I tell you what, if I feel like someone is constantly dragging my name down or, every chance they get, or my company, it's going to be hard for me to be favorable. It really is. Right. And we're all humans. I may get some flack about this, but I'll go ahead and say it. You've got to understand that a lot of those men's earned where they are. Now, whether it should have been a woman or not, I can't answer that. I can say probably that is not the case in every instance. There are probably cases where it could have or should have been a woman. But I think just to throw everybody under the bus instead of going, what can I do about this?
Right.
I mean, do you remember fan clubs?
Oh, definitely.
I wrote so many letters to Donny Osmond. I'll just go ahead and own it. The Donny Osmond fan club. But the power of words is very, very potent. And I think that reaching out to someone and saying, let's just say a DJ, mm-hmm. writing him a letter once a week, send him a kind email, being the person who sends a box of chocolates on Valentine's Day, and then having a copy of your song tucked in that box.
Do you know what that is called? That's called building relationships.
Exactly.
That's exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the reasons it's a good old boys club, I think, is because these men have known each other, and they've worked together, sometimes gone to school together, and women don't sometimes coalesce together as much. So we can have little cat fights, and the group that we maybe went to school with, we've moved on from, or someone their marital status have changed, and so all of a sudden you're not in the same circle, and that's going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen. But figure out a way to work it in your favor and look at it honestly and say, okay, we're going to tear this wall down. It may be brick by brick. It's not going to happen overnight. And I would like to also say women that are in other countries, never be afraid to ask for respect. Respect is so, so, so important. And I want to once again say balance that with who you are as a woman. It's okay to be proud if you are married and you make dinner for your husband. That is okay. And you're going to have plenty of women out there that relate to you, and they will buy your music because they go, well, you know, I love my husband too, and I don't mind making dinner for him. There are going to be other people who are in non-traditional relationships, and they're going to say, I tried a traditional relationship and that didn't work for me. That's okay. And use that to your advantage and find your people. Know where they are and who they are and make them your army. I'm dealing with a couple of artists right now that I'm working with, and this is the constant conversation we are having. Multiply your army and put them to work for you. One person can do a lot, but 100, think of what they can do. And don't forget that translates in going to the ballot box, in voting. And women in other countries, don't despair. We watch you, and I'm amazed at what some of the women are doing in other countries that have not had what we've had. They have grown. You talk about a male-dominated society. You know, they weren't even allowed to vote, maybe till recently. Or they're the first generation that was educated as a woman. Again, that did not change overnight, but it's changing. And that is good news.
As we wrap things up here, a young artist wants to reach out to you because you do provide that consulting, that counsel. How can they find you?
I'm on social media. You can find me on Jana Jones Uttz Facebook, or you can private message me. And I also have a new email address, Jana Uttz at the Business Side of Music.
That's right.
That you can email me. Woohoo! And let's have some conversations. I would love to hear from some women of other cultures. I want to say I'm very, very proud that we are reaching across the genre lines, that we are reaching across gender lines, and we're saying, you know, we're all in this together, and we realize that art is different for different people, and we welcome you, and we'd love for you to welcome us. And that's a conversation I think America has waited too long to have. And I listen to a lot of ethnic music and music that comes from other cultures. One of the things that I don't know that maybe young listeners may not realize is that there have been cultures in the past where making music was outlawed. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a call to arms, okay? So the town bugler would go out and play something, and it would wake up the town, and the town realized danger was at hand, okay? Or there were drums, and there were different patterns or different drum beats, and that is how they guided their people, especially if an enemy was at bay. There have been cultures where music was outlawed, and they piled up all the instruments in the street, and they burned them. They went into the homes. They snatched everything that had to do with art out of the hands of the people, and guess what happened? They made music anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They picked up sticks and stones. They went out and got sinew, from animals, and made strings and made guitars or banjos, or they hammered out a Caribbean steel drum. So it's one of the most powerful things we have on earth, and it's something that cannot be snuffed out. I'm very proud to be a member of the creative community. I wouldn't change it for the world. And one last thing I would like to say, this again is another conversation I think it's important to have, is you are more than a musician. You're more than a dancer. That does not define you. It is what you do, and it's part of who you are. And embrace being a multi-sided individual, and realize that a healthy balance is going to give you the longest career that you can have. And trying to snuff out something that is there, And it's an important part of your nature. It's an important part of your personality. Should not go away just because you're out singing songs on the road. Because there'll be times where you're not out on the road. And who are you? Who are you? All artists go through real peaks and valleys in their careers. I mean, you and I know all about this. You can be in the top 40 one minute, and the next minute your CDs are at Walmart and nobody's buying them. You need to understand that you are more than the sum total of the number of CDs that you sell. And that's very, very important. And people that have musicians in your families, let them know their love for who they are and that they bring value into life just for being who they are. Your dad, your mother, your lover, your husband, your wife. That is the beauty of our landscape in the world, in families, in cultures. And I think coming out of COVID especially, what we've seen going on with people having trouble getting back to a normal lifestyle. I understand that depression is really on the rise. I think that the divorce rate in a lot of ways was something that, I don't know if you'd say it exploded, but it certainly went up. And I think it's important to realize that you're not just that job. And the people around you care and love you, and you're all in this together.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. This was good.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, Bob.
Always is with you in the studio.
Absolutely.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.